You remind me of the great question, what is the relationship between James Madison's theory and James Madison's Avenue? Have we really overcome that Roman preoccupation with selfishness, greed, materialism?
De Tocqueville would note that in America we have a sense of enlightened self-interest, that as Americans we're much more willing to defer to the common good, put aside our own personal interests for the betterment of the country as a whole.
I do see with... Go ahead. Okay.
I think that our enlightened self-interest has declined actually since the America's founding. We've become this superpower nation, and I think our leaders are ambitious. We have congressmen who have a 98% incumbency rate, and they're constantly campaigning. They want to stay in office, and I think that enlightened self-interest has somewhat gone down, but we're different from the Roman Republic in that we still look out for the lower classes. The plebeians kept losing rights toward the end, whereas we still have minimum wage laws, and we have Medicare and welfare and education. Most significantly, we have public education so that everyone can have that chance to rise above.
I agree with.
You can also see evidence of a decrease in enlightened self-interest with our own Alabama Constitution. It centralizes power heavily in Montgomery, and it's clear that it would be to the behest of the Alabamian people as a whole if we were to amend it, cure the problems of home rule, change the fact that I have to vote on whether Montgomery can limit their mosquito population. And we have grassroots movements, but right now our state legislators are strongly holding on to our Constitution that severely needs to be rewritten.
For all of our talk of the people and the people, this was a very elite aristocracy that created this Constitution. Were they being hypocritical?
Well, you say it was an elite aristocracy, but some founders, such as Hamilton, came from nothing to where they were. So I think they did understand the common people. They did want to filter it somewhat. We didn't originally, not until the 17th Amendment, did we have direct election of senators, but they felt that, Madison felt that that such filters would bring out the virtue in the Republic.
Also, you see the process of may I finish? Also, you see the process of ratification where the property requirements were dropped and religious tests were dropped, and this was a way to represent the American citizenry. So it was not elite, it was the people that were voting on to ratify our Constitution.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a little intimidating sitting there, isn't it? I think let us give you some feedback as well. You've worked very, very hard to get to this day, and it clearly shows. I mean, this is a Unit 1 is a particularly difficult one. And what we're trying to do is to get you to think about the lessons of history. When you go back and read history, it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to interpret it. And this is not an easy unit. What I particularly like about your presentation is that you went back in history, you talked about the Roman Empire, and then you came forward to the time of the founding of the Republic and said, well, this is what we learned from Rome, and here's how we adjusted our institutions to overcome some of the weaknesses of the Roman Republic. And I think you did a very, very nice job doing that. One of the challenges in this unit is to be careful about injecting personal opinion. We all have opinions, and I think what's important is that you always go back to history, and you did that. You threw in, I think, Annie, this Benjamin Franklin about freedom or liberty, neither one without the other, and then I think, Jackson, you threw in Tocqueville when we talked a little bit about enlightened self-interest. So I think we try, part of our job is to see how well you know the material, kind of push you a little bit over the edge, and kept putting the car back on course. So it's very nicely done.
I agree. I thought you did an extraordinarily fine job starting out with warnings from the Roman Republic rather than the greatness of Rome. I think was a really smart move strategically because you can't justify a new science of politics if in fact you're looking to the greatness of Rome as your model. So starting out with selfishness, treachery, and oppression of laborers I thought was a nice way to go. Let me just tell you 2 quick places where I got a little bit confused, but that may have been my problem and not yours. You discussed the polity, the Aristotelian polity, as a mixture of monarchical, aristocratical, and democratical principles. And I didn't know if that's how you were describing the United States as an example of the Aristotelian polity, because then you went on to address the question of power must be derived from the great body of the people. Popular sovereignty absolutely undercuts the Aristotelian notion of the polity, the mixed regime, or the balanced regime. But again, that may have been my misunderstanding and not what you were saying. The one place where I do think I pick up a kind of disconnect perhaps in your argument, although again I may be totally wrong, is in your opening statement you emphasized the importance of citizens checking government, and yet argued in response to some of the follow-ups that Americans trust institutions. I wrote this down. Americans trust institutions, not people. Really? Public opinion polls show horrendous mistrust of our governmental institutions. No institution is doing well. And just wanted to tie you back to your notion that it really is the role of the citizen to check the government, as you argued in your opening statement. A whole lot more we could talk about because you did such a terrific job of putting a lot on the table, defending it very, very well, and giving us an extraordinary experience with you. Thanks.
Yes, let me echo that. You did an extraordinary job of presenting a great deal of information in a very understandable and comprehensive sort of way. I especially liked your detailed discussion of ancient Rome. We have a tendency to say, well, we copy this Roman model without going into the details of what that model was and talk about the 12 tables of law. And that was not, just didn't happen by magic. It was a political process that created that. Just a couple of details. I thought it was interesting that you would use Chaucer a story about Chaucer. That's sort of an indirect way of getting there. And you talked about Lucretia, and that might have been a stronger place to begin, because I think that for most Romans would have been certainly what would have grabbed their attention. But that's just a matter of judgment, and I always appreciate references to Chaucer. Also, the discussion of the will of the people and the people and the people, something if we had a lot of time to talk about, a year later, 1789, the French are going to be having this revolution for the people, le people, can't get my pronunciation right, and going to end up killing a whole bunch of people. Because they're in defense of the general will of the people, who happen to be represented by a few dozen intellectual elites. So the people can be this great idea. They can be a really dangerous idea as well. And I hope the founders were, I think, aware of that conflict. I think we'd do well to be aware of the danger of using those words as well. But I thought that you did an extraordinary job, and I was delighted to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much.